Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Dill sitting here Sunday morning, getting the rewatch for that Tennessee Oklahoma matchup. And I'll start with this. Look, I've known you long enough that I know you ain't right about much. Go back 4 weeks, like you were dead on about this Tennessee team. And this was a Tennessee team that people knew was going to be good in 2024. You were kind of saying, no, they're not just going to be good. Like they're a national championship caliber football team. We had them as a top 4 team heading into the week. They might even move up there. Every time I watch Tennessee, you continue to be impressed with not just what the Tennessee offense looks like. I look at this Tennessee defense and say it's one of the best units that you see in the country. We obviously know that line of scrimmage play matters in the SEC. And I think at times, even going back to 2022, when that Tennessee offense was probably the best offense we saw in the country, the line of scrimmage play might not have been where it needed to be. You look at this Tennessee team in 2024, I think they check every single box that you're looking for in a national championship caliber team, fired up to get into this one. Now, before we do, and as always, to the Tennessee fans, can't thank you guys enough for rocking with the boys. This has been a program that's been a personal favorite for the Rock Boys over the last couple of weeks, and the amount of support y'all have shown the boys means the absolute world. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And Dill, without further ado, sitting here, 7:30 a.m. Eastern time, I will give you the tee box here. What was your biggest takeaway from this Tennessee road win in Norman, Oklahoma?
I think it was about Nico, and I know the defense is really, really good. I think we knew the defense was going to be a really, really tough matchup, frankly, for that Oklahoma team. I don't know that we knew it was going to be that tough, but it kind of played out the way I think you'd expect. They just dominated them up front, dominated the physicality on that side of the ball. But I think this was the first time we got to see Nico play in a game where things around him weren't completely perfect. I mean, they weren't running the ball particularly great in the first half, I didn't think, and he made a couple of giant plays to kind of springboard that Tennessee team and get the ball rolling. And then obviously they did start to physically impose their will towards the end of the game, I felt like. But again, those couple plays he makes, that throw to Dante Thornton just to hit him perfectly in stride, a couple nice throws to Brew McCoy. I think he made some plays for them that, again, we kind of saw Nico play good football, but again, everything around him was perfect in a moment where, again, they were getting a lot of pressure on him. You had offensive linemen going down. You were running the ball. He stepped up, made things happen, and kind of drove this team for the first half.
By far my biggest takeaway too. Now we're going to talk about this Tennessee defense that again just smothered Oklahoma, and we kind of thought that's how the match would go, right? You look at that Oklahoma team that were struggling on the offensive line. You look at Tennessee's defensive line. I think probably one of the better units in the country. Dill, you go on the road against an Oklahoma defense that I really do think is one of the better units in the SEC with two backup offensive tackles in the second half of this football game in an environment that is extremely loud. The pass protection was probably the worst we've seen it for Nico since he's playing for Tennessee. Hey, he didn't have to do a ton. And you're going to get a lot of people that maybe had an early bedtime Saturday night, look at the box score and say, oh, 13 to 21 for $194 and a touchdown. An average game for Nico. Couldn't disagree more. Like, yeah, they didn't ask Nico to do a ton because of how good that Tennessee defense was playing. Like, hey, we kind of know Oklahoma can't move the football, so we're not going to have Nico try to score 50 points in this football game. But every play they asked Nico to make, whether it was with his legs, whether it was pushing the ball down the field, he made, for the most part, kept the football out of harm's way in an environment and against a defense that was extremely tough. My biggest takeaway, too, and Dill, I think one of the takeaways I have for this football game is, hey, Tennessee can win it both ways. Like, if you want to win a shootout against Tennessee, good luck trying to. Because if Josh Heupel and Nico want to really turn it up, start running with some pace, and put a lot of points up on the board, they can do that. They can also win what I would largely kind of call a rock fight. Like, this was a game that was dominated by defenses, and Tennessee starting to win those games where you go back to 2022. If you were told me that a 2022 team in Tennessee, or 2 years ago, if you would have told me Tennessee goes on the road to Norman, Oklahoma, only scores 25 points and wins the football game, I would have told you you're crazy. This Tennessee team can win it both ways. That's going to help when you talk about winning national championships. Probably one of my bigger takeaways as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And again, I think the fact that Nico can play in that type of game and not make the mistakes, I think that's one thing we talked about. That was going to be a key to Oklahoma, is stopping the run and trying to force a mistake, trying to get Nico to start press a little bit. you just never saw it. I mean, when he had to throw the ball away, he threw the ball away. The ball is never in harm's way. I don't think
No.
I can count. Maybe you can call that fade they threw, that he didn't just get the ball up enough. One ball that maybe could have been turnover worthy, but even that would be kind of stretching it. I just don't think he put the ball in harm's way at all. And one other thing I'm kind of interested to see if this Tennessee team incorporates is him in a bit more of that design zone read kind of run scheme, whether it's a speed option, whether it's a zone read. I kind of like them throwing that in a little bit, frankly, when they weren't running like their power scheme. Oklahoma was doing a really, really good job with it. They're being really aggressive with their edge play, crashing down, firing down, trying to play from the backside. Their linebackers are playing really aggressive. I wonder if Tennessee can get to a little bit more of that, whether it's a zone read, whether it's a speed option. Both plays, frankly, worked a little bit for Tennessee today. I wonder if that's something they can reach into their bag of tricks when they play at Georgia or in Alabama and things aren't going perfect, if they can kind of use that.
100% agree with that. Like that package, those concepts, they're getting filed away. And I think Josh Heupel saw, hey, look, in the second half, like this game was never really in harm's way. And I get this on the scoreboard, it was a 10-point football game. I don't think there was a single second in the second half where a Tennessee fan was like, oh, I think we're going to lose this football game. So I think because of that, Josh Heupel was like, we don't need to have Nico taking any hits in this football game. But at a point, like Tennessee will need to kind of go into that bag and hit an explosive play. Guarantee you, we see some of those concepts later on in the season for Tennessee. Couple other points on offense, or at least one other point. I think that these playmakers on the outside are significantly better.
Drew having a great game was nice to see.
Was nice to see. Dante Thornton's a guy that, again, Tennessee is built on explosive plays. And when Dante Thornton has a chance to hit those explosive plays, he's starting to hit them this year. Go back to last year, was really inconsistent. That's another one of my takeaways. Like last year, the pass catchers just weren't good enough. They got difference makers on the outside. Yeah, I think the overall takeaways on the offense is, hey, Oklahoma was able to light box them and stop the run, which I don't think many teams will be able to do against Tennessee throughout the 2024 season, but Oklahoma was. And that kind of posed a little bit of a difficulty in terms of how Tennessee wanted to run their offense.
And the obvious caveat is when Lance Hurd and John Campbell are both kind of coming. I don't know that.
Agreed. That's a story. Nobody's going to talk about that. Like, do you know how hard it is to go on the road in an environment that is so loud? You talk about snap counts and hearing the snap counts against edge rushers that are legit dudes. And look, I get Dane Davis probably didn't play an elite game. They just won a football game on the road against a top 15 team with both starting tackles that were not there in the second half. That is incredibly impressive for Tennessee on offense. Now, let's flip to the defense again. The big storyline here, 40 rushing yards. Like our biggest question mark was that Oklahoma hasn't been able to find a running game throughout the first 3 games of the season. Tennessee's one of the best. I mean, Tennessee is going to be the number one rushing defense in the country after this week when the numbers get updated. We kind of said it's going to be tough for Oklahoma to all of a sudden find a running game against this Tennessee front seven. Dominant, right? You can also talk about the linebackers first. The biggest takeaway for Tennessee on defense, they look like an elite SEC defense. Like these guys are big, strong, fast. It kind of reminds you how Georgia just smothers and dominates teams in the front seven. Keenan Pili, absolute dude. Arian Carter, Dill, we kind of said this. Tennessee lost their 2 kind of starting linebackers from last year. And we kind of said, I think they get better at the linebacker position. Last night, Saturday night, like I think it showed it. Like these linebackers are so legit for Tennessee.
And you just see how much more athletic they are. Keenan Pili, especially, that's like a star performance. I think that was something, again, we only obviously got to saw him 1 game last year. I think it was against Virginia, and he
was damn good.
So it's like, oh, like they can have a really good combo with him and Beasley, and then he gets hurt. But that's the kind of game I think you think when you want to see Keenan Pili chasing down really athletic quarterbacks, making plays in the backfield, and just adding a stroke of physicality that I think does kind of inspire the team in a sense and get everyone rolling, where it's not like there does feel like a different energy, I feel like, to Tennessee and how hard they're hitting people, how well they're tackling, just something a little bit different than even when I saw last year. I thought they were pretty decent defense.
Yeah, no, they've taken a step on defense too. And their defense was really good last year. Like it's so funny because this is all we talk about on the recruiting trail for Tennessee. Like we're never surprised when quarterbacks and wide receivers commit to Tennessee because you want to go play for the Josh Heupel offense. the biggest difference you've seen in Tennessee over the last 24 months, and it's a phenomenal job by Josh Heupel in terms of roster building and program building, is, hey, where do we close the gap from teams like Alabama and Georgia? We got to get guys that look and move like guys like Alabama and Georgia have in the front seven. Last night reminds you of what a Georgia or Alabama front seven look like. Just bigger, stronger, faster than the opponent, not really giving them anything. Now, we talk about the linebackers. I think a even bigger storyline is the defensive line, right? If you have good linebackers, they can only be as good as the defensive line is. 24 quarterback hurries. And again, James Pierce, I don't even think has a sack on the season still. He's been extremely disruptive. But more importantly, and the broadcasters did a really good job of kind of emphasizing this, I go back to why Michigan was so special on defense in 2023. It was the depth on the defensive line, especially with Tennessee wanting to run some pace. The defense is going to be on the field a decent amount. Do you have enough guys to rotate in a football game to keep everybody fresh? They'll
And you get to see new guys emerge, like it seems like on a game to game,
yeah,
like Jackson Moy coming out and playing a really good game. Even in Jason Jenkins, I mean, guys who again we haven't seen a ton of yet this year, but come out and play dominant football, making plays, getting sacks, getting safeties, just being not
and they
losing.
all looked apart. Like their twos and threes on the defensive line would be starting on a lot of teams, not only in the Power Four but on other SEC programs. That's when you start talking about special front sevens. I think the second storyline, this is probably we're probably on the third storyline on defense, losing count. The secondary was by far biggest question mark for this Tennessee defense. Like, hey, we knew the front seven would be damn good. And hey, the front seven's doing the secondary some favors because there are not a lot of clean pockets for quarterbacks to operate in. That being said, this Tennessee secondary, although it's younger than it was last year, and I think a lot of people look at it and say, okay, you're not returning a ton of production. You lose some guys to the transfer portal. How good's it going to be? Again, once again, similar conversation with the linebackers. The young talent that is coming through this program, it's better than some of the fourth and fifth year guys that were on this team in 2023.
And Jermod McCoy, I think, is a
Huge.
massive difference maker, and just his ability to really shut down on the boundary. And frankly, Ricky Gibson, I think, is a very, very good player as well. So they now have two boundary corners that are arguably better than any boundary corners they've had in Josh Heupel's tenure. So I think you're starting to see that become a real difference where they don't need to play like they used to play, where it was kind of more of a soft zone, give up some yards, try to tackle, and then bow up in the red zone. I mean, this defense with those two corners who you can really trust to work in man-to-man coverage really consistently and even take the ball away, obviously, in Jermod McCoy's case, I think he can play a little bit of a different style. And you see Tim Banks really heating it up, really trying to smother and step on throats rather than just kind of like, okay, we'll get it to the red zone and we'll try to be tough there.
100%. Massive change in the mentality. Like you go back to Tennessee's defense in 2022, just simply from a personnel standpoint, I couldn't even hold a candle to what Tennessee from a talent standpoint. But more importantly, like the mentality of this Tennessee defense is different. Like we want to go out and dominate. Like we don't want to give up an inch. They gave up 226 total yards in this football game, forced 3 turnovers. Complete performance by Tennessee. Though we were high on this team heading in, you were higher than me. Just keep buying stock in Tennessee throughout the first 4 games of the season. We'll wrap it up there. Appreciate you guys rocking with the boys again. The Tennessee fans, you guys continue to show a ton of love. We appreciate y'all. If you guys do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.